Welcome to Replenish the Atmosphere of Discovery, where we discover the Master's plan for our lives. Today, we are going to be discussing mental strength. This is session 82. Whatever you do that takes thought, right? Every action, reaction, and response, whatever causes any kind of physical, mental, or emotional exertion depletes mental energy. Okay. Whatever you do that takes thought, every action, every reaction and response, whatever causes any kind of physical, mental, or emotional exertion depletes mental energy. Okay. And we need it to survive, right? Our physical body needs energy for all of our biological processes, and our mind need energy for every mental process. Okay. Some mental processes you may not have considered that take energy are your persistence, right? It takes mental energy. Your confidence takes mental energy. Stress, worry takes mental energy, right? Your willpower involves your mental energy. Your faith takes mental energy. Fear and emotions, all of these take mental strength to participate in or to maintain. So mental and emotional issues are experienced and manifest through our thoughts and behaviors. Again, mental and emotional issues are experienced and manifested through our thoughts and behaviors, which takes and drains our mental strength. Each process, right? Each thought, each feeling takes mental energy. So if you haven't done much, but you're wondering why you're so tired all the time, this may be why. Okay. Your mind could be taking the energy that your body needs to maintain your organs, right? But instead of regulating your mental capacity, you're adding more weight, right? You're adding more things to process. That shouldn't be. So we're not even talking about the normal day-to-day processes you need to live. We're talking about the additional stuff. Okay. So the enemy of your soul uses regular and extreme circumstances of life to instill fear, despair, hopelessness, anxiety, discouragement, and stress. He uses these things to weaken your mind. It doesn't matter if it's a big deal or a little deal. He will try to amp up those things that should be a little thing, right? These hyper emotional processes take more than just a small amount of strength just to even entertain the feeling, right? So we're talking about you let it go past your thinking process. So now you're feeling what you're thinking. Okay. And this is how the enemy gains control of your mind, because you don't have the strength to fight after he suggests to you to blow stuff out of proportion, to allow people to overstep boundaries, right? And to keep staying up every night worrying. You don't have the strength to fight whatever he's doing. Okay. But if we took even 10 minutes a day to actively renew our mind, we would catch those subtle suggestions, right, that he uses to disrupt our peace. And we talked about disruptions last week. If you haven't watched that one, please go back and watch it, because it's those little things that we don't handle that build up that causes us to stress out, right? You need mental energy to persist, to persevere, right? That takes mental strength to have faith, to break the power over things that's trying to take you out. Some stuff that happens, it's just to get you to look away or to go in the wrong direction, right? To disrupt you, to distract you. But some stuff is intended purpose is to literally cause you to give up your mind, literally cause you to go insane. It's intentional. It's not an accident. It's not a coincidence, right? Especially if your purpose involves something that takes deep thought, something that takes developing strategies, right? Or anything that takes a strong mind in order to orchestrate. And so we have to do a better job of protecting our minds, right? Our motives and our intentions cannot be suggestions from the one who hates us, the enemy of our soul, right? So we have to start discerning that. Some things can be true, right? But can he use it? It doesn't matter if it's true. It doesn't matter that you have a right to be angry, right? Can he use it against you? What is this going to cause? What is this going to distract you from? right? Every mental, emotional, or behavioral issue that you have starts with an intended purpose, right? It's not for nothing. Okay. That purpose could have been for revenge, right? Could have been for peace, satisfaction, love, anger, right? Everything that you do has an intended purpose. There was something that needed to attach itself to you in order to drive a response out of you, right? And whatever drives you to respond is the motive whose result is what your life will become. Whatever's driving you, that's going to be your motive. Okay. And that's what your life will become. Wherever your life is, if you find your motive, that's what drove you there. Okay. What and who makes you have to respond a certain way, right? And why do you even absolutely have to respond? Have you thought about that? And so that's why we should recognize our influences, right? Who and what are we making important? Whose opinion are we actually listening to? Is these actually our thoughts that's happening, right? Our community can introduce motives to us that will challenge the intents of our heart, right? And change the intents of our heart, which can alter our direction. All of our issues have a purpose. Every single one of them. There is an intent behind each and every one of them. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to use that to for your purpose to go in the right direction? Right? All of your issues have a purpose. Are you going to learn from it? Okay? All of them have a purpose. Every single one of them. Stress, pressure, and worry takes a lot of mental strength to maintain. I know y'all can agree with that. Stress, pressure, and worry takes a lot of mental strength to maintain. How often do you have those types of thoughts in a 6 hour period? How often are you having stressful thoughts running through your mind? Every single thought, right? So we're not talking about the thoughts you think after the initial thought. The very first thought, every single thought takes a little bit more from you. Okay. So with about 60,000 thoughts that we think a day, and you don't get rid of that first thought, right? So it creates more thoughts that turns into feelings, right? And you don't even recognize you're now feeling what you should have cast out when it was just a thought, right? Now those feelings are attaching to your memories and your soul wounds, and even more energy is going out. And you don't even feel the energy that is sucking out, but you feel that anger real big, right? You feel that hurt real big, right? You feel that pressure real big. You feel those, but you don't feel it. It's taking your energy, taking your strength, right? Pressure causes you to lose strength. So no matter how strong you are, or no matter how strong you once were in a certain area, if you keep allowing yourself to be pressured, it will weaken that area, even your strengths, right? If you consistently come under pressure and you have not renewed your strength to resist that contact, right? You may be causing physical damage with something that should have been handled when it was just a thought, right? So now the thought then turned into a feeling and now it's affecting you physically, right? And remember, in order to apply pressure, there needs to be a point of contact. You can't apply pressure without contact, right? That point can be a thought, right? That point of contact could be something you heard, something you saw, something you felt, right? Which means that it can come from your mind, it can come from your will, it can come from your body, it can come from your community, it can come from something you watched on TV. Pressure must be allowed to pressure must be allowed to maintain contact with you mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually, right? Which means that you have to give it permission. You have to let it into your mind. You have to let it into your emotion. You have to let it have access to you physically, right? You have to agree or accept its proximity to you in order for it to create a point of access. So you are not under pressure until you accept that point of contact, right? You accept it because you don't have a guard. You don't have a guard over your eyes, over your ears, over your heart, over your mind, over your soul. right? But it must be allowed to have that access, right? And so you must come to a place where you can resist that contact, where you recognize it, right? You can assess a situation when the thought comes, okay? Before it starts becoming a feeling, to determine whether or not it is beyond your capacity. A lot of us are under pressure because we fail to use a one syllable word. No, right? If you're still dealing with pressure and you missed that session, go back to session 69, right? We talked about pressure in depth. It needs a point of contact, and you are the one that allows it. Okay. So we're not avoiding pressure by ignoring it, right? We are assessing it and removing it. We're not suppressing it and repressing it. We're not avoiding it. We are assessing it and removing it. There's a difference, okay? We're not acting like problems don't or won't come up, because they will every day, right? You will have something that pops up. I'm telling you, assess it and act accordingly. Not ignore it, right? Or not assess it and then leave it alone. No, because sometimes you assess something and you still don't do anything about it. Do something about it, right? Handle it. Avoiding and ignoring it still leaves it unresolved. Okay. So it just becomes unresolved, piling up in your subconscious. So no matter how far back you push it, it's still in process and it's still taking mental energy. Okay. Avoidance steals energy subconsciously, right? And it's most likely stealing it in your dreams, okay? Those unresolved issues, your brain is still trying to work to find a solution because that's how God created it, right? Working overtime since you want to address it while you're awake. Y'all ever wake up tired, right? There is some unresolved issues there. It's something going on in your subconscious that you are not dealing with, that your brain is trying to process because you finally laid down, right, to get some sleep, but your brain is still overworked. Okay. So let me tell you how avoidance shows up. We experience avoidance mentally by remaining undisciplined. Okay. By ignoring the truth. That's avoidance, right? By forcing opposite thoughts and feelings. If you feel sad, but you forcing yourself to be happy instead of telling somebody how you feel, right? Basically lying to yourself instead of dealing with the emotions and the feelings that you feel. Also, avoidance is getting distracted purposely. Like, you know, you're supposed to do something, you intentionally do something else, right? So we don't focus on what we're supposed to be doing, where we're supposed to be going. These all take many thoughts, right? Which is not beneficial, which is wasting mental energy. Okay. You should not just be sleeping when you lay down. You should be resetting and resting to gain the strength you need for the next day, right? For the thoughts that you're going to have to think the next day, not the unnecessary ones, right? You shouldn't be completely depleted of strength every single day. Your rest should be able to balance you out. When you have strength left at the end of the day, your body has more fuel to regenerate cells. Your mind can rationalize and reason well, and your emotions are regulated, and you're at peace, right? When we prioritize friendships over purpose, and jobs over health, and opinions over meaningful relationships, we fail to have balance and peace or the power that we need to drive us into the next season, right? And so even if we happen to make it to the next season, we have these unnecessary burdens and we can't even enjoy the reward for our enduring, right? The rest we were supposed to receive is now exchanged for playing catch up. And then that cycle continues until your health fails or until your mental capacity dwindles, right? So it just becomes a cycle. Yes, you're going to have seasons where you have to work hard, but it shouldn't be every single day you're depleted of strength, right? You're going to have some days where, you know, you gotta burn the midnight oil, but that shouldn't be every single day. And so you must seek to build a mental strength that empowers you to maintain a mindset that can grow as you grow, that can evolve with you, right? Your personality is formed by your mindset. You have to take care of your mind, right? Your personality is what you do with how you think. Okay. So to evolve into a better human being, you have to have a mindset that grows, not a mindset that stays the same, and definitely not a mindset that shrinks, right? You need a mindset that enables you to be emotionally, mentally, and spiritually sound by giving you the ability to regulate and rejuvenate each area and keep it balanced, right? All areas. We should be balanced in all areas. We should not be lacking in any area of our being, right? So to assist with building mental strength, try to stay connected to a evolving support system, right? Everybody is not for every season. Some people you got to let fall off and you have to open yourself up to new people. Okay, I know that's scary, right? But we want to stay connected to a evolving support system, one that isn't complacent or standing still, one that does not enable mediocrity, right? They're okay with you just being a little bit of what you're supposed to be. And they're not pushing you to be who God said you would be. There are some people that know who God called you to be, and they will not push you. They will allow you to stay in that place, right? When you begin to become you for real, right? You are tapping into a strength and a resilience that may feel new to you, right? It's a new experience, but oftentimes it was always there, right? It was just designated for your purpose. You wasn't supposed to use that extra strength on crap. Sometimes that feels scary because it feels new, because now your mind is more open and stimulated, which creates an atmosphere to grow in the right direction. So when you start, taking those layers off and getting down to who you really are, and you start feeling that extra energy, that's supposed to be used to go in the right direction, right? That's not the time to quit, right? At that time, you're able to be filled with the right character, with real emotions and feelings, not the ones that you conjure up, the correct train of thought, instead of those residual effects of your traumas, of the residual effects of people's opinions and your hardships and those false identities. That's not what you're supposed to be putting energy into once you start peeling back those layers. Okay. Your mind stimulation is for restoration of life, right? It's for purpose. Okay. It's not to arouse poor choices and an attraction to distraction. That's not what that stimulation is for. That's not what that extra energy is for. So you have to be careful as you open up to new possibilities, that these possibilities are beneficial and that your excitement doesn't send you into destructive patterns, right? Because sometimes once we start doing that work and we start getting to the root of stuff and plucking out stuff, you find you have this extra energy. Don't start being destructive with it, right? Being open and expanding towards new possibilities should be building more strength than what it takes to put it to work, right? So that opening up to new possibilities should not be draining you, right? It should be more than enough for you to do the work to maintain that, okay? Anxiety steals mental strength, okay? Anxiety steals mental strength. It strips you of hope and healthy expectations, right? And that's what drives you and motivates you to live a purposeful, fulfilled life. Anxiety is a thief, okay? It twists your mind, it twists your emotions, and then your body into a hopeless, empty shell that's just existing, that's just surviving, right? And it does this until all traits of your original design is diminished. You're no longer yourself, right? Empty souls are shells and people that fail to exist because they took on the personality of anxiety until it stripped them completely of themselves. Okay. These mental struggles that the world has now are not things that we have to live with. I know people say that, right? Oh, this is something that cannot, um, you're just going to have to take a pill for this for the rest of your life. No, we've given up hope, or we've allowed it to be mixed with the negative influence until that hopeful expectation was stripped from us completely. Do not lose hope. If you have hope, that's a good motivator, right? You lose hope. You get sick, not just mentally and emotionally, but physically. Okay. So now we have humanity that is turning into these soulless beings, turning into these robots, not feeling anything anymore, letting everybody and everything else tell them who to be. That is so far from their destiny, right? We just turn off and tune out. And guess who loves that? Because now he can put all his thoughts, all his feelings, and he have an empty body that's available for him to act out his feelings, right? And put more darkness into the world. But we are supposed to be the light, right? And so that's why those who have been physically, mentally, and emotionally traumatized need counseling. Okay. When you don't handle these issues in your mind, you lose your sense of self-worth because you base it on your explanation of why something happened to you, right? And more often than not, you take on the shame and the guilt that doesn't belong to you. Okay. And you're so focused on understanding why crazy is crazy or why evil is evil, right? That you forget that you will never understand something that you're not, right? So you start focusing on that until you become evil and you become crazy. All of that just to understand someone who you had no business trying to get into their mind to understand them. We're trying to understand why would they say that? Why would they do that? And you focus so much on that that you start doing the thing that you're trying to understand why they did it. You're not supposed to understand that because that's not you, right? So to gain back your sense of value, you start doing it in destructive ways, right? You become another person because you've allowed someone to erase every trace of you. Okay. And you need that focus. You needed that focus to combat the destruction to your value system, not to pour into understanding the mind of an evil person or trying to understand the mind of a crazy person. If we stop that, we will have a little more strength, right? We won't understand crazy if we're not crazy. Okay. People who have evil intentions or desires for you, they devalue you in their minds long before they do it verbally or physically, right? If you want to understand crazy. So we're going to stop focusing on that today. People who have evil intentions and desires for you, when they devalue you, they do it in their minds long before they do it verbally or physically, right? The way they speak about you to other people, or the way they speak about people like you to you, right? Their distaste is evident by their actions. So when you notice these things happening and you start to think of yourself as less than, do not ignore it, right? If you choose to ignore it and you place them as a foundation for your value system, you will end up not valuing yourself at all. And this is what happens when something traumatic happens to somebody. They take on that mind of that person. And now they feel about themselves how that person felt about them, right? Don't focus. You should be focused on you, right? And combating that destruction of your value system, right? Getting a support system, people that will lift you up, not being so focused on how could this person be this evil? You don't need to know how. You need to get away from them and you need to build yourself back up. Okay. So mental strength is affected by these areas I'm going to list, and it also affects these areas. So emotional resilience. Okay. Physical endurance. If you lack physical endurance, it will affect your mental strength, right? Not having mental strength will affect your physical endurance, right? Mental stability, your confidence, okay? Your mindsets, you need mental strength, right? And we're talking about negative mindsets as well. You need mental strength to maintain that poverty mindset. You need mental strength to maintain that victim mindset. So if you're going to use mental strength, why not let it be a positive mindset? Why not let it be a conquering, a victorious mindset, right? How you handle storms, how you handle disturbances and disruptions takes mental strength, okay? Your willpower, authority takes mental strength. Not being able to be vulnerable or show weaknesses in a healthy environment. Let me say that, right? That takes mental strength. Soul wounds takes mental strength. It takes mental strength to overcome and mental strength to keep them, right? All of these things affect your mental strength and can be affected by your lack of mental strength, right? So every mental, physical, and emotional wound is fertile ground for seeds of failure and lack. Every mental, physical, and emotional wound is fertile ground for seeds of failure and lack, right? That's why you do not need to, you cannot not afford to stay mentally or emotionally wounded. So the same way a physical wound should heal quickly, right? Because it's a perfect place for an infection to set in as long as it's not healed. You must be willing to receive healing before thinking that you can break generational failure, right? You must be willing to go through that healing process. Otherwise, you'll end up bleeding on people to gain success. And being successful at the cost of hurting other people still produces failure, right? So you're not really winning and you're not really breaking the cycle because it's still going to produce failure. So whether your confidence was broken due to traumas or self-inflicted wounds, sometimes it's not something somebody else did, sometimes it's self-sabotage, right? It must be strengthened through the action of healing and renewing, not just saying, I'm on my healing journey, I'm on my healing journey. It's an action, right? Not just speaking it, it's something you're doing actively, healing and renewing. Self-confidence will build your willpower, right? And so that's why your lack of self-worth, your lack of value, and other people's opinions keep popping up, keep having to be things that you have to face. Once you learn how to process that thing and assess it quickly, you don't have to worry about that, right? It is tempting. It's very tempting to drain the thing that builds you up, right? So you have to make sure that your confidence is in who God made you to be and it is not being polluted by thoughts of prejudice and domination of other people's thoughts, other people's opinions, right? Mental strength's biggest fuel is the power of your will, which is also attached to hope, right? So you see why you cannot give up hope. You have to always have an expectation of something, right? Mental strength, biggest fuel is the power of your will. And so, because that is so, you have to prepare before things happen. Strengthen your mind. Be strong already, right? Prepare before the storm, before the circumstance, right? If you haven't prepared your mind or exercised your strength, you'll get hit hard, right? You'll suffer losses, loss of sanity, loss of the will to fight, loss of life, loss of freedom, right? And when you don't prepare your spirit, you lose hope, you lose might, you lose your life, you lose your peace, right? And when you don't prepare your soul, you lose your will, right? You lose your ability to manage your emotions. You lose your inner strength, right? So we handle this before even the threat of the storm. So you don't have time to allow the enemy to make you be in an uproar over small things, not being able to process small thoughts, not being able to, you know, regulate your emotions. And then once all of that builds up, and then here comes an actual situation that you have to deal with, and you can't even deal with it. Something that you have to deal with. Okay. So your willpower is connected to your mind, even though it originates in your soul. Okay. It requires mental energy to survive, which means that you being stressed or overwhelmed depletes it. Okay? You being stressed and overwhelmed depletes your willpower. And that depletion causes you to give in to tempting things, right? Because you don't have the will to fight. You give in to tempting things like those temporary pleasures. You give in to the temptation to quit. You give in to the temptation to lose focus, right? When you are under a lot of stress or you lack self-discipline and self-control, it affects your mental energy levels, okay? So willpower is not only your ability to control or restrain your action, it is the strength within that pushes you, that drives you, that motivates you, right? To do what it is that you are supposed to be doing every day. Okay. And so you might have the authority to control yourself, right? But not the willpower to see it through. Just because you have the authority to do something does not mean that that's what you're going to do. You have authority as an adult, right? Doesn't mean you're going to always act like an adult, right? You can be put in a leadership position. That does not mean that you're always going to lead, right? It cannot be just in words or in titles. It must be in action. You have to obtain freedom in your will to be about the stuff that you're talking about. Okay. So your willpower is a type of strength that is single-minded and purposeful, right? And you need this strength to resist evil temptations and to obey God's plan, right? You need willpower to have faith, to obey, right? It takes mental strength to maintain the ability to resist even the smallest temptation, right? Your mental energy levels determine the difficulty and whether you can whether you can remain strong enough to resist. Okay? And so it's helpful to express your thoughts and feelings about the tempting activity to somebody who can hold you accountable and tell you the truth. Right? You need a good revolving you need a good evolving community, right? That's not going to let you just, go away, let you be less than. Okay? Not doing this affects your mind. And those tempting thoughts keep repeating in your head, right? Draining your strength to resist. So you strengthen your willpower through practice, right? Self-discipline, self-care, self-awareness, right? You train yourself by regularly practicing these things. Let it permeate in your spirit and soul so that it is a part of your daily life. Your self-care should include things that increase your mental energy, not just things that make you look good, okay? Your self-care should include things that builds your spirit. And it doesn't take hours a day to do this. You can start with 5 or 10 minutes, purposeful meditation. Let me give you a list of energy wasters. The first one, letting other people have power over your emotions. And this look like when you say, they made me do it. They made me say that. They made me feel this way. That's an energy waster. Nobody can make you do anything. Okay? Not saying you don't have a right to feel what you feel, but they can't make you do something unless it's by force, right? Physical force. But if they're not physically forcing you, they can't make you do anything. That's a choice, right? Another energy waster, resentment and unforgiveness is so much energy, right? To hold on to unforgiveness. Another energy waster, low self-confidence or value, okay? It takes energy to constantly put yourself down and to stay there, right? Because God is reminding you of who you are. And it takes energy to keep pushing that aside, okay? Proving yourself to be right. Waste time and energy, right? Move on. That's an energy waster. And if you're already low on energy, when you get that temptation to prove your point and you know you're already low on mental strength, let it go. Just let it pass on by, right? Another energy waster, Trying to remember stuff instead of writing it down, making a list. This is something we don't even think about. Just make a list so you don't have to keep it stored in your mind, right? Distractions are energy wasters. Focusing on things you cannot control, big energy waster, because there's literally nothing you can do about it, right? And you're giving energy to all of these thoughts and they keep playing. And if we have over 60,000 thoughts a day, that's a lot of mental energy going out, right? Mental block or fogginess, an unbalanced diet, lack of adequate sleep, lack of motivation, and bad moods are the result of low mental energy. Okay. And they also drain what you have left. So you cannot be productive when your mind is empty, when there is no fuel in your brain, when your spirit is empty, when your soul has holes that are not filled and mended. Okay. And so we don't like to expose our weaknesses or our vulnerabilities, even in a healthy environment with people that are strong in these areas, right? This steals mental energy, trying to keep covering it up when they can help, right? Weaknesses are frequently based on refusals, right? Most things that you won't talk about or that you won't face head on are your vulnerable areas, right? Can we agree to that? You are protecting your weakness in a way that doesn't allow it to become strengthened or healthy. It makes you better when you begin submitting those weaknesses to those who are stronger in that area, right? If you're blind, wouldn't you rather walk with somebody who has sight, or will you allow your stubbornness to make you keep stumbling, right? Some people who refuse to be vulnerable with anyone is most likely due to a previous injury. Maybe they have control issues or both, right? When you have a problem submitting to others, you're going to refuse to be vulnerable with them, right? And that includes submitting to God. Okay. God's strength is made perfect in your weakness. So when you refuse to submit, you are refusing the strength of God to make something perfect, to make it whole in your life. Do you understand that? And it's the same way with people. When you stay closed off due to injuries, not caused by the person in question, right? You are refusing their strength in an area that can benefit you, right? Increase your acceptance and make you whole. Okay. So the proof of your wholeness, your healed mind and heart, is your increased trust in the right people. And you know that by the amount of access you give them to the real you. That means there's no more masks, there's no more other personalities. You're not sending your representative, right? When you give people that access to the real you, that's proof of your wholeness. That's proof of your healed mind and heart, right? When you have real support, and I mean from positive influences, not support from negative influences, right? When you have a solid belief system, those core principles, right? When you prioritize whole self-care, right? Not just physical things. Okay, that means you're prioritizing peace and boundaries, right? When you are authentic, right? Because it's draining to be somebody else all the time, right? When you are authentic, you will build up your mental strength. Okay. So, real support, positive influences, right? A solid belief system that you will not shake on. Okay. When you prioritize whole self care and you are authentic, that will help build your mental strength. Okay. And sometimes you will blame other people for your problems, not just because you might be avoiding responsibility, but also you just don't have the mental strength to do the work, right? Problems with self control, procrastination, and dwelling on negativity can point to a mental weakness as well. Okay. So if you struggle with self control and procrastination, and you're always dwelling on the negative things, you may be weak mentally. Okay. And so remember with expectations, you have to meet people where they are or limit their access to you if you don't want to develop trust issues later, right? And we found out that trust issues is when you have the wrong expectation for people, right? It causes you to lose trust in them. So pay attention to what is draining your mental energy. Whatever you do that takes thought, every action, every thought, every reaction, every response, whatever causes any kind of physical, mental, or emotional exertion removes mental energy. And we need that mental strength to survive, not just to think. We need it to survive, right? Our physical body needs energy for all of our biological processes, and our mind needs energy for every single mental process, okay? Even the subconscious ones, right? So start assessing some areas in your thinking, in your feeling. How long are you taking to process unnecessary stuff? Right? Things that you really need to think about and focus on, you want to respond in 2 minutes. But the stuff you don't need to be thinking about, you want to hold on to for weeks and months and years, right? It's taking so much energy that can be put somewhere else, right? That can be put towards you building something, put towards your healing process, right? Put towards you renewing your mind, put towards you getting some good sleep, right? And actually resting and resetting and rejuvenating. So God bless you all, and I will see you all next Friday at 3 p.m.